Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Welcome to the Holy Moment Podcast, folks. The podcast where we watch movies with you, discuss the moments that work, the moments that don't, and the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. I've been doing that pause a lot lately. I forget that last word. I gotta get it down in the noggin. How do those Shakespearean actors do it?
But Jeffrey, you're an actor. You should know how they do it.
I suppose. I just haven't been doing. I haven't been doing my my index cards. I haven't been using the techniques. But anyhow, welcome everyone. We're discussing the movie Hamlet today. Not Hamnet, but Hamlet, 1948 version. Nathaniel, what's your experience with Shakespeare?
Oh man, Jeffrey, I feel like you're one more jaw-dropping, beautifully cinematography, great acting, black and white, crisp movie away from making me a bit of a slut for Shakespeare. But my experience with Shakespeare is almost zero. I mean, I had the quintessential you had to read Romeo and Juliet in high school that I spark noted. I don't remember doing anything with it in college. And then I think the first William Shakespeare movie we watched, all of them have been for the podcast. We did The Tragedy of Macbeth with Denzel Washington, which I absolutely love. One of my all-time favorite watches for the podcast. Then just 2 weeks ago, we did Hamnet with Chloe Zhao, another one of my favorite episodes. And then today we got Laurence Olivier's Hamlet, which is up there, really solid. Probably top 10 for the podcast, while the other two are probably top 5. So I feel like 3 for 3, banger after banger, but they've all been for the podcast and they've mostly been consumed via film. I've not read any of his work. I haven't seen any of his plays in person. And so that's my experience with it. And I'm loving every minute of it so far.
I'm very happy with all of the Shakespeare that we've encountered. Hamlet's an interesting case because it's an adaptation of a historical fiction novel that describes the events of William Shakespeare's life and his wife, particularly that period in which their, I think, eldest son dies from the Black Plague. And in response to this, he writes this play as a way of dealing with that grief. Having watched Hamnet first and then Hamlet second, what was that experience like? Did it shed new light onto Hamnet? Did it make you view Hamlet through a different lens?
I will say multiple times throughout the movie, I tried to put myself in the mindset of okay, you watch Hamnet and now you're watching Hamlet, and obviously Hamnet is fiction and ultimately Hamlet is a play by a dude. So it's not like they're one for one true events inspiring one another, but still trying to keep the movies within the same boundaries to experiencing them. But I had a hard time with that. I honestly kind of just let it go, kind of forgot about Hamnet and just watched Hamlet. The biggest experience, I would say, is every once in a while, the character of Hamlet, who he was and what he stood for, would remind me of okay, even though Hamnet is a fictional work, it's still based on true life experience or true life events where Shakespeare and his wife lost their son, Hamlet, and then he wrote this play inspired by him. And so it is this idea of okay, if you lost a child, it is an interesting almost grief and immersion therapy to then think about the life they could have had, the grandeur, the nobleism that they were, the fact that Hamlet died and he was proven right. He wasn't mad. He was a good person. He was given a knight's death. So I would say the biggest way that Hamnet informed my way of watching Hamlet was that okay, if I was a father and my son died, how would I put him into my art and how would I think about him? So not just how would I put him into my art, but how did Shakespeare as a real person think about his real son who was dead? And again, it's not like Hamlet, the character, is a one-for-one correlation to his son, but still just that's kind of the mind frame I was in when watching this movie compared to Chloe Zhao's Hamnet.
No, those are some good insights. I was also looking for this film to be in conversation with that future work. And like you, I kind of forgot about it. I just got so immersed. And that just goes to show you the power of this particular adaptation. This is actually the very first Shakespeare to film adaptation of Hamlet specifically. And it took the world by storm, took the Oscars by storm. It won Best Picture. It's a film that was not only directed by Laurence Olivier, he played the lead actor, and that privilege has only ever been met again in the movie Life is Beautiful, where the actor that leads it is also the director of the story.
We watch Life is Beautiful, right? That's the German Jewish one.
Yes, so Life is Beautiful is the story of an Italian Jew who, through humor and optimism, is trying to lead his child through a dark time, and particularly through the experience of being in a concentration camp, shielding him from the horrors around him so that he can grow up somewhat mentally stable. Really sad tale, very sweet tale at the same time. Odd contrast of tones there. But he was the second actor-director to have met that milestone. And so with that being said, what are your thoughts on Laurence Olivier as a director and Laurence Olivier as an actor?
First, I must say, just funny that we watched both movies that have that achievement, the only two. I have to say, I liked Hamlet a lot more than I liked Life is Beautiful. I don't know about you. I know we watched Life is Beautiful as your suggestion, and you really liked it. And I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed this movie a lot more. That being said, I think, first let's take on his work as a director. I think Laurence Olivier understands fit. Like Jeffrey, I think you said this in the last podcast, and you said it to me off podcast, like, hey, look for the language of filmmaking and how impressive it is. I think Laurence Olivier understood what it means to make a movie. He understood how the camera and all of the tools that film has compared to books, compared to, music, compared to paintings, the tools it has at its disposal. And he used every single one of them beautifully. This is a movie that you think would be shown in a theater in 2026. The grandiose of it, the cinematography of it, the mise-en-scène of it, the acting in it. So him as a director, I think he absolutely nailed it. Everything felt very intentional. Everything had a place. Everything had a moment, especially when you're dealing with something like Shakespeare that is so grand, that is so granular in how you have to take it in, as in, like, it can be hard to understand. Like, I think a lot of people are daunted by Shakespeare. Me is one of them. Like, I don't understand Shakespeare that well. It's not what I'm going to watch on the average night. But Laurence Olivier made Hamlet accessible. Like, granted, there are scenes and there are moments that were confusing, and I didn't get the full breadth of it. But it just makes for a movie that's worth rewatching. But I think through the language of film, he made the movie so accessible. So, as a best picture, I think it deserves that. I know he got nominated for Best Director. It'd be cool if he got all three, but I know he's just nominated. He didn't win. But then when it comes to Best Actor, I would say I thought he did a great job as a Shakespearean actor portraying Hamlet. I actually enjoyed Denzel Washington more in Tragedy of Macbeth. Just to say that I think he did an amazing job. It wasn't his acting that drew me into the movie, I think, as much as it was some of the film language and the cinematography and the actual writing of the play.
That makes perfect sense to me. And we can talk about the acting more a little later, but I want to rewind to the directing bit because very first time I watched this, I don't know why I turned it on. I think I just wanted to go through the Oscars and watch all of their Best Picture nominees. And I wanted to start with the ones that also won Best Actor, simply because as an actor, that's what interests me. When I turned it on, I wasn't approaching it with dread, right? But I was a bit apprehensive in that I appreciate Shakespeare. I didn't want just a stage recording. I was worried that this would be essentially that. Just a lot of wide shots, static, not particularly creative, perhaps some great performances, and of course the language. You can't fault the language. You can fault William Shakespeare. But I didn't trust that this actor was coming in knowing what he was talking about and knowing what he was doing when it came to handling the camera and composing shots and overseeing and vetoing and giving his approval to like the editing decisions. But the more I watched this film, the more I got drawn in by the way it uses its visuals, by the way it uses sound, by all of these unique directorial decisions that made this a cinematic work of art, not just a work of art. And so, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Laurence Olivier is a fantastic actor. He's a legendary actor. He is an actor of a certain style, but as a director, this might be one of my favorite films of all time.
Wow. That's a big feat. I definitely I was surprised like with the tragedy Macbeth. I think it climbed, it's I would say it's easily my top 20 tragedy Macbeth. And then this movie I would have to percolate on it a little more. I would say easily top 50, probably top 30. Um but there's a world in which it's top 20. It was a very, very well done movie, especially for it's a longer movie, 2.5 hours. Again, black and white Shakespeare. You think it's something you have to dredge through, but no, it is captivating. And then again, it only to forget that it was 1948. No one listening to this podcast was alive, I think, in that what is that, 50, 70, 80 years. It would have been like right about 80 years ago. And so just the fact of how advanced their cinematography was, how advanced the acting was, I feel like we just forget and we like to think that, oh, movies back then, the acting was cheesy. The cinematography's plain and bad. The set design all looks bad. No, no, no. Like the cinematography was breathtaking. Some of the sound design, the visual effects genuinely felt like it was from 2026.
Yeah, this is a very forward-looking play adaptation. It felt very innovative and modern. One of the things that I really appreciated, the cinematography, how the camera is constantly moving, but it also works very well with the blocking of the actors. You don't get the sense that one is doing more work than the other, right? Everything is very intentional. Something I like that the camera does is whenever we're getting into the mind of a character, there is this pulsating, gradual approach at their face. It moves towards them and then it retreats. Moves towards them again and it retreats, and each time it moves toward it gets a little closer, and then as it retreats there's a blurring that happens. Things go out of focus. It's reminiscent of a heartbeat, and sure enough, in those moments we would hear the beating of a heart to accompany the movement of the camera and the zooming. It just felt like such a fantastic way to express the inner state and the anxieties of the characters on screen.
I would agree, and that probably was my biggest takeaway from the cinematography. There are some beautiful, like my favorite shots were probably some of the wide shots, some of the composition that they had with some of like the angular, with some of like the leading lines and the depth of field and the contrast and the shadows of light. There's a few I'd like to talk about, but what I think was maybe the most impressive was the use of the close-up. I feel like the close-up in film wasn't really utilized until later in maybe like the 70s, 60s, 70s. But for 1948, like Jeffrey was saying, so like so desperately we want to know what's going on in an actor's mind, and especially Shakespeare with such the grandeur, the avant-garde type of language that's hard to understand. You need to see the actor's face to understand what's going on, and they did not shy away from the actors' faces. Very often when there was a monologue or an intense scene, one of my favorites was in the bedroom of the mother. Hamlet goes in and is like, stop being such a whore. Stop sleeping with my uncle. This is not good. I love that scene. And he's standing up from the bed. He's like kind of at the foot of the bed and the camera's right on his face, really close. And in the background, she's only a little bit soft, but it's kind of a deep depth of field. We see her in the background on the bed in anguish. And that just felt like such a cinematic shot that you would see in 2026. I was not expecting to see done 80 years ago. And so I love the use of the close-up of seeing the actors' faces, but then also having a lot going on in the background to make it feel more like the cinematography feel in 2026. Again, not to say that this day and age cinematography is better or worse than back and then, but it's just cool to see a movie doing what we're doing nowadays, but 80 years earlier.
It makes me think of another older movie. This one's actually silent, but it's similar both in setting and in the style of cinematography, The Passion of Joan of Arc. And that's a movie that made heavy use of close-ups for the people accusing her of witchcraft, and close-ups on her tear-ridden face. And that was one of the most expensive sets that had ever been built up to that point. And the producers were so upset with that particular director because despite them spending so much money to build this set, very little of it was shown because so much time was spent in the close-up. And so this movie made me think, Laurence Olivier, he overheard that conversation and made sure to avoid those pitfalls where he's going to use a healthy amount of close-ups, but we're also going to witness the grandeur of this beautiful set and the winding hallways and the doors where we don't know what exactly they hold, but we know that they hold something.
And going back to the camera movement, also because I think when we think older movies, we don't think of complex camera movement. And sure, maybe they're not as silky, buttery smooth as 2026 as you can get with your gimbal and your steady cams, but they're still creative and they're purposeful. Like I think very early on, I think when we transition from the first scene to the second scene, we get this like 360 spin and then this pan down in the courtyard and then push into the bedroom. Like the camera was moving in a way that like Steven Spielberg moves the camera. Again, more noticeably, also done 80 years ago, so you can't complain. And so just for all those reasons, really impressive.
I also love the editing transitions that they would use, because there's this one shot in the beginning after Hamlet has had this encounter with his dead father. Mist is everywhere, right? And the wind blows the mist in front of the camera while we're on this wide shot. And as the mist covers it, it dissolves into a close-up of his face as Hamlet's lying on the ground. And it felt so natural, that transition from mist to face.
I'm happy you brought that up because that was something I wanted to ask you because I you know a little bit more about Shakespeare than I. They did a lot of that in the tragedy of Macbeth. They did a lot of smoke coming in, swirling around, filling up the camera, and then it dissipated and we're in a new location. Went from a close-up to a wide shot or vice versa. And so as soon as they started doing that, I was like, whoa, that reminds me of Tragedy of Macbeth. Do you know if in Shakespeare's writing or his original plays they used a lot of smoke and so it's a nod to that, or is it just a coincidence? Or do you think Tragedy of Macbeth is just taking inspiration from former Shakespearean movies?
Well, I think that the Tragedy of Macbeth was absolutely taking inspiration from this film. If you're thinking Shakespeare in black and white, I can't imagine how anyone could not think of the 1948 Laurence Olivier Hamlet movie. And even the sets are not quite similar because the Tragedy of Macbeth was all on soundstage and it's very minimalistic, but it still takes place in an imposing castle that's somewhat sparsely decorated. We get a little more ornamentation in Hamlet, but even then the environment feels cold and barren. But I don't know if, quite frankly, it's been a while since I've read Hamlet. I don't know if Shakespeare makes use of that in the action lines or...
The architecture and set design was reminiscent. I do agree. It wasn't a one for one, but I do feel that there were shots, especially they did a reoccurring shot of some character. It would be different people's POVs looking down this long corridor of hallways. And it reminded me of the shot in the Tragedy of Macbeth, where Denzel Washington's character, when he looks down that long hallway and he has the whole conversation about, is that a knife? But it just ends up being a flickering of the keyhole. And so that shot really reminded me of the two. And so I'm curious if I'm curious if Shakespeare, being the same person writing the same stories, had these similar tropes. If long corridors meant something to him thematically. Or again, if the directors were just inspired by one another or just coincidence.
I feel that the cold and imposing fortress, closed off, claustrophobic, millions of rooms inside, is almost a mirror into Hamlet's own mind. Something that we should know about Hamlet is, as smart as he is, as capable as he is, as good a swordsman as he is, as clever as he is both active and he is inactive. He is indecisive. In fact, that's the note that we opened this movie on. The line that Laurence Olivier says, this is the story about a man who couldn't make up his mind, was not in the original Shakespeare play.
Oh, really?
Yes, but that's a common interpretation where Hamlet receives this vision from his father that he's been murdered by his brother. And rather than acting quickly on that, he stalls, right? He waits for more information. He puts a play on. He is about to kill him as he's praying, and then he abstains, right? He's constantly putting things off and considering and mulling things over in his mind. And ultimately, his lack of decision early on leads to greater tragedy at the end. Yeah, but what were your thoughts on that? Knowing that that was an addition on Laurence Olivier's part that was kind of framing the story for the viewer. Did you get that sense at all?
I appreciate you brought it up because no joke, it was one of the things that I actually found to be disconnected when they opened up that line of this is the story of a person who couldn't make up his mind. And a little bit before I started the podcast, I was skimming through the movie again and I saw that opening line and I felt personally that Hamlet was someone of decision making. Now, again, when you said what you said, it does make sense. I was a little bit like when he saw the ghost of your father. If someone you loved had died and then shows up a freaking ghost and says, "Hey, by the way, here's some earth-shadowing piece of information," you probably would do something about it. So I was a little confused when the next scene we see him trying to make out with Ophelia, being like, "Wait a minute, shouldn't you go like deal with like your mother and your uncle banging and making a mockery of your father?" So I can understand how he put things off, but I ultimately found Hamlet to be a character of decision making. I really liked that. There are so many more people out there who are much more well informed and can speak on Hamlet's character, but I'm just going to speak on this movie and what I saw and what I interpreted, nothing else. I liked that he obviously went through some level of can I trust what I see? Am I going mad? But in my opinion, it was everyone around him who thought he was going mad. It was the queen, it was the king, it was Ophelia's father. But Hamlet never seemed to me to be a character who struggled with going mad. He more like knew what he was doing. And sure, maybe he took his time getting there, but he was always taking actions to get there. He was not a character in my mind who was going back and forth. Oh, is my father's ghost right? Am I going crazy? Maybe I don't want to do this. From the moment his father's ghost showed up, I felt like Hamlet was on a trajectory to figure out what happened. And maybe he didn't do it insanely efficiently, but it did not feel like he was a character of a wishy-washy nature who couldn't make up his mind.
No, I think that's fair, and we get indications from other characters that there is "quote unquote" a method to his madness, right? They're saying, well, we think he's mad, he's acting mad, but there's something behind it, a logic to it that I'm just not getting. But I do think that the lines get kind of blurry, like throughout the film. I think that he is a mind that perhaps is not on the verge of breaking, but is running perilously close to it. Such as the scene where he accosts his mom in her bedroom, and he's seeing an apparition in the hallway that she does not see. I think that we can assume in that moment that his screws might be loosening a little. We can reliably know that the ghost that he talked to at the beginning was a ghost. We have several other witnesses to this fact. But in that moment, he appears mad not only to his mother, but also kind of to us. And the camera movement and blocking demonstrate that perfectly, where we see Hamlet and then we see him looking into the hallway where there is clearly some sort of image, and then the camera turns to his mom and then turns back to the hallway and that image is gone.
I want to talk really briefly about that scene if it's okay with you. On the note of kind of what we're talking about, I love that scene for so many reasons. And a little sneak peek, that scene is kind of my holy moment, but I'm not going to talk about why I think it's my holy moment. I'm going to talk about something else. Again, talking about the 21st century filmmaking. You know, when Jeffrey and I were in film school, something they harbored, no, something they really drilled into us was setups and payoffs. Stakes, every scene needs to have a change, a shift. And I love that scene because Hamlet comes in with such a poise to him. At this point, he knows. He's basically caught his uncle in the act. He just had thrown the play, and his uncle ran out in a fit of anger and also conviction knowing he killed his brother. And so Hamlet goes up to his mother room and he's going to give her a piece of his mind. And by golly, he gives her a piece of her mind, and he basically emotionally torments this woman as she lays on the ground or on her bed crying, weeping. What have I done? How could I have done this to my husband? And so the whole time, the power dynamic is consistent. Hamlet is in control. Hamlet is the one who is laying into his mother. Hamlet is the moral victor here, and the mother is the bad person who needs to be brought to terms with what she has done. And it could have ended there. But then you get this great moment of sound design. Again, sound design that you think would come from the 21st century. He's laying to his mom, and finally he kind of stands there, kind of happy with himself. I did it. She sees the error of her ways. All is good. And then all goes like silent. And we like Jeffrey said, we push in on his face. It's getting kind of soft. It's kind of zooming in. And then these whispers start. And he falls to the ground. And it's because the ghost of his father is there. And he's taken back by it. And all of a sudden we end the scene the opposite of how we started it. Where the queen was the vulnerable one. The weak one laying on the bed. Hamlet is on the ground, crazy, pointing at a ghost that she cannot see. And then the mother is the one that composes herself and is kind of sitting straight up in the bed while Hamlet's prostrate on the ground. And is the one who says, I see nothing there. And we end the scene kind of flipped all of a sudden. The mother seems more composed and Hamlet seems just distressed. And so again, it's small things like that that just really worked for me. And that I love that Laurence Olivier added. And again, I know ultimately it was a pre-written scene by Shakespeare, which is even more impressive that they were doing those setups and payoffs all the way back then. But it just really added to that scene and to his character of being fully with it, but at the same time, maybe a few screws loose.
For sure. And, you know, another switch in that scene, too, is when he feels that he is in control. He gets the sense that there is someone hiding behind the curtains. His mother gives it away, and he thinks it's the king. And he thrusts his blade into the curtain, and he ends up killing the old courtier who happens to be Ophelia's father. His name is Polonius. And in that moment, too, as he's staring at the body, you get this sense that, okay, I kind of made a mistake here. It's a little crack in the armor that then spirals into the breakdown about the apparition.
Also, what a baller move. Imagine you're in someone's room and you hear something and go, you're probably the person I think who's in here. And then you shoot through the doorway, killing the person. And then you're like, oops, wrong person, my bad. Just, he drops to the ground. He's like, what a pity it was you. Okay, moving on. Mother, you're a whore.
Think about how much hate was in Hamlet's heart in that moment. And throughout the film, considering moments prior, he had the prime opportunity to kill Claudius, his uncle. But what stopped him was that Claudius was praying. And it's not, oh, I feel convicted. My uncle is praying. I can't kill him while he's praying. It was, oh, my uncle's praying. That means that if you're to die now, he's going to go to heaven. I don't want him to go to heaven. I want him to go to hell. I'll have to kill him at another moment when he's doing something stupid or drunkenly or full of wrath.
Yeah. Which then crazy to be like, oh, well, he's hiding behind this curtain, so now he can die and go to hell.
But, I mean, it just goes to show you it's one of those moments where he puts something off for later, and that ends up biting him in the butt.
But, I mean, I gotta say, I love it. You love a spiteful hero where he's just like, I can't let this guy go to heaven. Can't do it right now. It's something that I believed. It's a little silly. It's a little like, come on, just kill him there. The movie would be over. This is so convenient that you don't kill him. But as me as the audience, I believed it. I believed Hamlet's spitefulness, especially, back in the day, they probably really did believe this. Like, oh, he's praying. There's a good chance he goes to heaven. And so understandably, he doesn't want that to happen. And so that's what I liked about Hamlet. It's funny because when he died, they were like, what a true hero. What a good man. He was vindicated of the madness. He is a justful person who was just fighting for the right thing. Let's give him an honorable burial, which is like kind of correct. But Hamlet's kind of unhinged, and I liked his unhingedness. I liked how he's just walking around doing what he wants. He has a certain level of brazen. Is that the right word?
Yeah, brazen.
He's very brazen, bold, and I like that about him. And I like that he's like, well, I can't kill this dude now. I'll do it later.
You know what? We kind of see that throughout the film, where he's sometimes more interested in playing with his food than eating it.
I mean, you have the whole middle act, which is like the play, where he invites in actors. So he's like, ooh, I'll get my uncle to confess with a play, with the arts. Nothing's more deadly than the arts.
I will say it. I love that spiel he gives to the actors about how to do their craft, because I think it speaks true to how actors act and how they ought to behave. Right? He's speaking, don't overact, right? Be subtle. Try for realism, right? That's what we're wanting, is to elicit real emotions out of people. And so We want them to feel that what's happening on stage is natural to some extent. That felt like Shakespeare directly giving a treatise about acting to the audience.
Which even felt more meta, breaking the fourth wall, considering Laurence Olivier was the one who was the director. So it felt like a fourth wall breaking of a fourth wall breaking. Yeah, I felt that very much in that moment when he was directing them. I was like, wait a minute, you are the director.
It's interesting. This play is a bit meandering at times for the reasons that we've discussed. He's playing with his food, he's not eating, and that ends up being his downfall. But an hour and 30 minutes of this play was pared down. There was an hour and 30 minutes of content that could have been kept in that was intentionally excised by Laurence Olivier. Now, the reasons that he made the cuts that he did was not only to make a shorter film that could be consumed in a shorter and more consumable sitting. He had intent behind it. He wanted to focus more on the psychology of the characters, and particularly Hamlet. And so the things that he chose to leave out was mostly the comic relief related items, and two characters in particular, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Now, this is a controversial element of the film, the things that were left out. But in my case, I don't mind it, even though I love the original play. And that's because I trust Laurence Olivier. He has spent his entire career doing Shakespeare. He knows Shakespeare in and out. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone that loves Shakespeare and understands Shakespeare more than he does. And so when he chooses to cut something from the story for an artistic purpose, I trust that he's doing this with full respect to the author.
It all comes back to, I feel like, medium specificity, like we've talked in multiple episodes. This movie is not a play. A play is not a movie. Yes, are there 4 or 5 hour long movies? They exist. They do. You can do that. But it's just better for the medium delivery of a film for it to be shorter, to be tighter. And so I don't know the original 4 hours. I've not seen it, so I cannot talk if it's better or worse. But I feel like it's a little silly to get angry at it. If you wanted it to be the stage recording of the 4 hour, just go to the play. Just go to the play. We're transforming. We're not making it better. We're not making it worse. We're changing it. Now, obviously, you can make something worse. You could make it better. But I'm just saying, like, the ultimate goal is to transform it into a movie. Transform a book into a movie. A song into a poem. A painting into, a video. They're not the same thing. So I do think it's a little silly when like purists, this isn't the pure form of what Shakespeare wanted. Well, yeah, it's a different form. It makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that he couldn't have, again, I don't know the 4 hours, so I don't know if he did a good job or a bad job. But I'm not saying maybe you could have adapted it to 2.5 hours in a better way. That could be argued for sure. But I just think it's a dumb argument when it's like, it's not the exact same thing. Gosh dang it, Dune wasn't page for page. They had to take out certain elements. And it's like, yeah, it's different. It's different. So, of course, it's not going to be 1 for 1. Go read the book.
Yeah, on the point of Dune, it was interesting when I watched Dune for the first time. I had reached the halfway point of the Dune novel, which ends when Dune Part 1 ends, so it was perfect. But so much of the story in the books takes place in the characters' heads, right? And we are privy to their inner thoughts and the explicit motivations behind each action, and that's completely missing out of the movies. Now, that doesn't mean that the movie's bad, although it did seem to be an important part of the books. The movie has different strengths. It allows the viewer to experience the scope, the breadth of this world in a way that you can't quite capture in books. But in this case, another example of medium specificity, right? There's the shot at the end of the king being surrounded by the guard, and they're all pointing their spears at him. I thought that was a very effective image. If you're watching a play, you can't have a bunch of guards surround the actor that you're wanting to look at, because you'd be in the way of the actor. Like, the audience couldn't see him. At best, you could maybe form a semicircle. But you can't have those bird's eye view shots, and of course you can't do editing.
I'm happy for that point, because I feel like just the way you alluded the movie, I thought this was more of a stage recording. I was going in expecting more of like one kind of stage craft and excuse me, one type of like stage created for this movie, and we kind of have a wide and a close up, and we push in and push out. So I thought I was really expecting more of a stage play. So when the movie started, I was like, oh, this is like a movie. I was very excited.
Yeah, I'm very happy for that. No, I really wanted you to like this film, and I really wanted to communicate, hey, pay attention to the cinema language. It will impress you.
No, it really, I mean, literally within the first like minute, it was like the third or fourth shot in the entire film was my favorite shot in the entire movie. Who was, it wasn't the two guards. He's like an important royal person. That is
Horatio.
Horatio. Yes, Horatio. Horatio is going up to the walls, because he's been told, hey, there's something strange. You need to come see it for yourself. And he's in the bottom corner of the screen. So bottom right hand. And he starts to go up these stairs, and the moonlight is casting bright on him, so he's fully in light. But then the stairs weave up into the top left hand corner of the screen, and at the very top you see this guard stop in this opening created by walls, and he's completely blacked out in silhouette. And it's this beautiful shot of deep depth of field, and it reminds me of this lesson I learned many moons ago. One of the first jobs I ever got in Atlanta was like a 3-day shoot for a company doing like internal HR recording videos for the company. And I got hired kind of as a PA, just assistant, helping carry stuff around. But their videographer, I was helping him set some stuff up for they were about to record in a room. And I don't remember what we're talking about, but I made the comment, fresh out of film school, being like, oh yeah, that close up, it's so cinematic. And that shallow depth of field, when a character's face is in the camera and everything behind it's blurry and it's beautiful and they're nice and shiny, and you got bokeh in the background. And I remember he let out the deepest, most depressed side I've ever heard of a man. And he went, that's just cinematic of the past like 20 years. Go back and watch any old film, and deep depth of field was cinematic back then. And he wasn't a jerk about it, but it sat with me. I don't watch a lot of older movies. And as I've been watching more movies for the podcast, I get what he means. These deep depths of fields, these wide shots and when I say deep depth of field, everything is in focus. It's not just the person up close. It's everything from the foreground, the midground, to the background. And so this wide shot that this movie, like the second or third shot, the whole movie, this beautiful deep depth of field, you could see all of it. But the way they got contrast, and today's, when you have shallow depth of field, you get like the contrast and the person's face is in focus, but everything else is blurry. But they use literal contrast, darks and lights. They put our main character Horatio in the light, in the moonlight, and the soldier in the background in pitch blackness. And they use that as visual contrast rather than focal length contrast. And just gorgeous, gorgeous shot.
I really, really like deep depth of field, and I've always liked it a lot because you can fit more images into the frame, and you can imbue more with meaning, I feel, versus if you're hyper-focused on a particular subject, then perhaps that can express something about that person's inner state, their anxiety. But I like pretty sets, and I like being able to show them off to people. And I like busy frames. And so I like it when the directors allow other elements of the movie to shine.
I've always felt in film school, I'm not, the close-up, as we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, is a crucial tool in the filmmaker's tool belt. But I've always been a wide shot type of person. I've always thought the wide shot took more focus. Because again, when it's a wide shot, every single element is important. With a close-up, it strikes. I think close-up is powerful for the emotional 1-2 punch it does. But I think for the wide shot, there's something beautiful and crafting and the art that the whole crew does. From the costumes to the set design to the directing to the acting. There's just something beautiful about a wide shot. But I've since recently become more enjoying of, like you're talking about, deep depth of field, which is kind of. I mean, you can have shallow depth of field with a wide shot for sure, but less common.
No, and I agree. I think there is this tendency among amateur filmmakers or beginner filmmakers to over-rely on the close-up, with the desired effect being, okay, we're getting the audience into the actor's headspace more directly. But that loses all of its power if the close-up becomes oversaturated. You have to contrast it if you want it to punch, right? Vary the shots. You've got some very wide shots, some medium shots, and then you get the close-up. If we're constantly on a close-up, we're not going to care that we're close because we're just used to that.
And this film, like we said earlier, with its close-ups, it even did a good job of putting things in the background, whether it was shallow or deep depth of field. They didn't do a lot of just singular close-ups, which I enjoyed. They kept their frames busy.
Speaking of shots and images in the frame, one of my favorite images is we have the gravedigger, and he takes the skull out of the grave and he places it on the dirt. And then Hamlet, his shadow enters the frame, and the head perfectly captures the skull of the jester called Yorick. And it perfectly foreshadows Hamlet's death, one. And two, it's just a striking visual. First time I saw that, I was blown away.
It's a great shot, and you gotta love when you can put in symbolism and foreshadowing into your cinematography. It's very nice. What do you think the meaning? Sorry, not to hijack it. There surely is a meaning of the whole conversation where Hamlet shows up and finds the skull of this dude and is like, "Oh yeah, this is our jester that like came around when we were kids." Like, do you feel like that had symbolism? And like, as far as like the idea of, because like how I took it was like he had this fondness for this person and he's holding this skull so flippantly. And he's talking about the great times they had and looking at the skulls, the person's right there, and then he just throws it on the ground. Kind of like maybe some type of representation of the frutality of life and like the tragedy of this and everyone dying. But I don't know if you had a different take on it. Or if people think there is meaning in that bit of dialogue.
Oh, I 100% think that there's meaning, and I think it's exactly what you alluded to is life is brief and yet meaningful, but it's tragic that it leaves so quickly, and we're reduced to nothing. Right? Hamlet's father was so incredibly important to him, and he thought that he was so incredibly important to his mother, and no doubt he was, but within the matter of 2 months, she remarried, and she remarried his brother at that. So just the way that tragedy strikes and the different ways that we cope and how it affects us, and there is a sense of futility, but also a sense of inevitability.
Speaking of the mother remarrying and the king, something I was surprised, and I haven't decided if I liked it or didn't like it. A more stereotypical story would have had the king at the center point of a bad, cruel, evil man. It would have made him easy to hate. We would have rooted for Hamlet, but he wasn't. I don't know if it's because of the time period. It's like, oh, to them this king is horrible, hated, loathsome person, and everyone's on board against him. And obviously, it's horrible that he killed his brother. But I don't know. He didn't strike me as this grimy, horrible person that was duplicitous and just wanted to get rid of Hamlet and hated Hamlet and was just this lust-filled, power-filled person. He genuinely, to me, sometimes seemed like a kind-hearted person. But I think I think that alludes even more to the tragedy of like, oh, it wasn't this evil monster of a brother that killed a brother. It was a human that out of greed and out of lust did kill, but now he is at the end of the day a human. It's a lot harder to hate a human than it is to hate a monster. And so I'm curious if Shakespeare wrote him in particular, like for that reason, or if it is just a lost in translation from, 100 plus years ago to this time frame of like what a hated villain looks like. Because nowadays it's so like a villain is a villain. He goes in, he burns the village down, he beats the women, and he does evil for evil's sake. So we can really root for our main characters. But I didn't necessarily find myself rooting for Hamlet to kill his uncle, to be honest with you. Like, I liked Hamlet, and I was for what he was doing because he's the main protagonist, but I wasn't rooting for him like you root for the Avengers to kill Thanos.
I think that there was complexity built into this character, particularly the scene where he is calling out to God for forgiveness. That was one of my favorite bits of acting in the whole movie. I wish that guy had been nominated for an Oscar, if for nothing else, and for that scene alone, because you got the sense that there was a genuine anguish. And he felt the weight of his sins and the weight of his murder. I will say too that shows the power of acting, and in the hands of a different actor, perhaps we would have received a different interpretation, one that was more slovenly and selfish. Here we see a man who is complicated. The indications that he's a bad king also are given to us mostly at the front end of the play, I feel, where it's indicated by Hamlet that he's throwing all of these parties, and it's a drain on the country's resources, and it makes the Danes look to be drunkards and carousers in the eyes of neighboring kingdoms. And so there is a sense of dishonor that is being brought to Denmark, especially in light of this recent national tragedy of the king passing.
Okay, I do vaguely remember that, but I think that was earlier on in the movie where I haven't quite anchored myself down in the film yet. Something went over my head. Something I also liked about the king was, again, my interpretation at the beginning of the movie, he did seem to want to be like, hey, let's brush the king under the rug. I'm the new king. Hamlet, like, you're my new son. Like, I want to take care of you. Like, I think he was like, hey, if you don't look into the death of your father, we can be copacetic. I'm not trying to kick you out. Like let's be chill. Let's be friends. But as the movie went, yes, he wanted to oust Hamlet because he didn't want his power to be threatened. But I also feel like he ousted Hamlet because he was feeling guilty. Like he couldn't look at Hamlet and not think, oh my gosh, I killed my brother. And so I do feel like there was that layer of complexity. Like the scene where he sent Hamlet off to England. He's like, you're done. You're going tonight. To me, it didn't read like, oh my gosh, he's going to catch on to me. It felt much more like, I can't stand to look in the mirror. And when I look at Hamlet, I'm looking in the mirror of a murderer who is me. And so I thought that complexity helped with his character.
Yeah, especially because we get a very clear indication that Hamlet knows what his uncle's up to and what his uncle has done.
Yeah, his mother.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Exactly. Hamlet puts on the play, and at that point, the king knows that Hamlet knows. The members of the court also have some sense of what's going on. I love the camera movement in that scene where we're seeing the reactions of all of the different players in the court. We see Horatio as the realization hits his eyes. We move to the king, who is in his chair, clutching the arms, shaking in his boots.
Quite literally. I love the physicalness that Laurence Olivier decided to direct that actor. He was literally clutching his butt cheeks and the chair as if he was about to shit himself on the verge of just like dysentery as he was just watching that play. I love that moment. I was like, no human has ever looked like that ever before.
Everything that Hamlet has done up to this point has just been to guilt his uncle.
Yeah.
He hasn't made any moves towards killing him yet. And so, of course, that guilt is going to weigh down on him. That's a very intentional act on Hamlet's part.
And I'll say this last thing. What I love about the climax of that scene with the play, love Hamlet's shit-eating grin, where the king is very clearly breaking down. And I like how all the audience, it's like they're picking up on it. They're like, wait a minute. The play is showing a brother killing a brother. Wait a minute. The king is over there acting all antsy. So everyone's starting to pick up on it. He's like gripping his chair like he's about to die. And Hamlet just shows up with a torch and is like, do you need a light? And he has the biggest shit-eating grin, and the king freaks out and flees. And I love how he screams, lights, turn on the lights. And it's just a bunch of people rushing in with torches. It just reminds me that I love that I'm in a time period with real lights. And I didn't have to, bring a torch with me every time I had to poop in the middle of the night.
It makes me think of how people talk about buffets, right? If kings had buffets, modern buffets, they would view this as rich beyond measure. But now you drop $15 and you've got all you can eat, baby.
Yeah, and we struggle to pay the 15. We're like, this is too much. Speaking of, here at the Holy Moment Podcast, we're going to go to our favorite segment, our segment we've done in every episode. You can go back and listen to it, where we take a minute in the middle of the episode to talk about a fun fact of my day. Jeffrey, you want to hear I don't know what's fun, maybe more sad fact?
I would love to hear a fun, sad fact, Nathaniel.
I was watching a reel, as you know, we do in America, 21st century. And it was a badass, ripped dude with a pole, and he was doing kicks in the air. He was flinging it around like a badass samurai. But in the background, it had very stereotypical Chinese music. And the only thing I could think of was like, I would like to eat a Chinese buffet right now because that's my correlation with that type of Chinese music as this ripped man was doing things I could never do. And I unfortunately had no Chinese buffet. I ate tilapia instead. And so that ends the segment of the Holy Mo podcast of a fun fact about my day.
Tilapia is good, though.
I do like tilapia.
I think. I haven't had tilapia in a very long time, but I think I've only ever had it in a restaurant setting.
Well, we get it because it's cheap and it's tasty and it's healthy. You can get like a bag of like 10, it's like 8 fillets for like $8. And it goes well with like any vegetable and any carb.
I have 20 cans of tuna that I...
What a fun fact of Jeffrey to throw out. Why do you have so many cans of tuna?
It's so that I can survive off of it for weeks at a time. And that's what I'm going for, is I don't really need to make complex meals for myself. As long as I have my 60 calorie per can, 20 grams of protein per can tuna, I can be content.
Well, there we go. Now with our 2 fun facts out of the way, we'll know who the true fans are. Whoever's still listening to the second half of this episode, getting through our fun facts of Chinese buffets and canned tuna. We love you and we see you.
Let's talk about Laurence Olivier's performance. Now, as I indicated earlier, a lot of people love Laurence Olivier. He is a very legendary actor, very classically trained actor, somewhat stagey, I would even say. But not stagey in a kitschy way, stagey in a this is artfully and intentionally expressed kind of way. But it is very different from the kind of acting we see in today's world and in today's movies. We were just talking about the tragedy of Macbeth earlier and Denzel Washington. Let's compare those performances and how they presented and how they affected you.
First and foremost, when it comes to Shakespeare and performances, there's always a sort of lens you have to view it through. There, maybe last episode, I think last episode with Emmanuel, we were talking about the veil being this thing that keeps us from fully reaching in and experiencing real people and real events, and how documentaries really make the veil really thin. Shakespeare has a habit of like making the veil really thick, making it more like a blanket, like a sleeping bag. And it's just because it's such hard dialogue to process and get through that it makes the believability of it, the humanistic parts of it, a little harder. I think the themes of Shakespeare are very human and very relatable, but I think some of the dialogue and therefore the acting, because you're acting out the dialogue, can make it very hard to grasp. But like I said at the beginning of the episode, I think Laurence Olivier and Denzel Washington did a good job of making that veil go from a sleeping bag to maybe just like a thin little throw blanket, but not quite a veil. So I'm just first and foremost say that while I enjoyed both performances, I do think there is not a stigma, but an obstacle to get through to really, really enjoy the performance. But maybe but then again, people who really just like watching acting and don't need to relate to it, then you could probably enjoy it. For me, I want to be able to relate to the acting. So there's already that obstacle. Now going to the different performances, I would say Denzel Washington's was more believable. Maybe it was just the character of Macbeth that he was playing compared to Hamlet, but I thought there was more subtlety in his. I thought the way he performed his anger and the slow rise to anger over the film was very believable. Where I felt like Laurence Olivier's performance of Hamlet, this kind of brazen, slightly mad, but at the end of the day has a good heart. It didn't affect me as much. I thought his performance was a little more one note, not to say one note, but more one note than I think Denzel Washington's. I think Denzel Washington had more time. He took time with it. There was time for his acting to breathe. Where I feel like Hamlet, Laurence Olivier's, was a little more in your face, a little more aggressive. I would say his felt more stage acting. While Denzel Washington still felt very traditional and very Shakespearean acted, it felt more subtle. I would say that's probably the big takeaway. Denzel had more subtlety with it. I would say Laurence Olivier's was a little more staged, a little more aggressive in your face about it. And therefore just kept me back from really being able to latch on to his character and going on a journey and believableness with his character. What I will say, I love the physicality of Laurence Olivier. I love the opening shot after kind of the intro of the people on the gate on the bridge, where we have Hamlet sitting in this chair. Everyone's at this party, they're eating, they're having festive times, and he's draped over like a depressed melon. It's so dramatic. But also his chiseled face and the contrast with the lights, just he physically embodied this character, and I loved watching it. And so I did really like that about his acting, because acting so much about the physicality, not just what you say.
No, I agree. I loved seeing him toying with the bear bodkin on the cliff, right? The bodkin being the knife.
Yes.
Right? I love all of his, for lack of a better term, cunty poses.
That is,
Where he's like, striking a JoJo pose.
for hopes to not get canceled, I'll say it anyways. Also, very gay poses, I would say as well. Like when he's on the wall, like considering suicide to be or not to be, and he's like lounging out. It felt very gay to me. I'm not saying it's a diss. That's the vibe, the energy it carried, as the kids say.
Here's what it is. Hamlet is a theater kid.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think he is very publicly a theater kid. The way that his face lights up when all those actors and circus performers, like the troupe, enter the scene. He's like, these are my people. And he treats them as such, too. I love the interactions he had with them, especially with the dog. It's like, oh, I see you're doing well, and everyone laughs.
Yeah, it was in that moment. I remember that bit of acting, because like up until now he's been very brutish, very thinking, and he wasn't very liked. And then when those theater people came around, he lit up and he was having a grand old time. And that's a great way. He's a theater kid. He drives away the women that he loves, just like the theater kids, one for one.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's also a different era too, where when you're watching a movie in the 40s, you're not always expecting one-to-one realism. Or verisimilitude. Whereas with the development and popularization of method acting in the mid-20th century, we see more actors moving towards less of a constructed feel. Right? There's a famous story, I think it's Robert De Niro, who is playing in a movie with Laurence Olivier, and he's playing this starved and exhausted individual, and so he starves himself and he doesn't get sleep for days on end. He comes to set, and it's explained to Laurence Olivier what he's doing. And Laurence Olivier is like, well, has he tried acting?
What an amazing response.
Such a fun story. But they're just different approaches, and they're trying to achieve different things. And I think what they achieve are both beautiful in their own ways, but it has to be acknowledged that they have different processes.
Do you have a preference? I know maybe you say you preferred Hamlet to Tragedy of Macbeth. Do you have a preference in your performance of the two for our main leads?
I've watched this movie 3 times now. I might be a bit biased for my love of this movie. I find Laurence Olivier's performance more memorable. And maybe it's just that I appreciate the broader context more. But there's something iconic about Laurence Olivier's Hamlet that the Tragedy of Macbeth just doesn't have.
Yeah, that's fair. It's okay to have the wrong opinion, Jeffrey. I understand. We all have it sometimes. I just do love Denzel Washington.
I need to see him in more stuff.
I feel like he really brought the level of like a true Shakespearean actor, and then added a breath of subtlety in it, which I know I've said like 12 times, but I'll say it one more time if you didn't hear me. Subtlety.
Well, is there anything that you want to talk about, Nathaniel? Things that really spoke to you?
We wouldn't be the Holy Moment podcast if we didn't talk about Feminist Corner, which we do in every episode. You go back and listen to all of them. We bring up Feminist Corner every episode. We can't not talk about, I feel like, the Queen's character and Ophelia, because they play such main roles in the movie.
For sure. It's interesting. The actor of the Queen was 29 when she played this role, 28 or 29. And Laurence Olivier was himself 40. When watching the movie, I didn't really notice that. I didn't get the sense that Laurence Olivier was significantly younger than her, for sure. But I thought that there were maybe more peers, which just goes to show how well Laurence Olivier aged. But it's very interesting because I detected subtle Oedipal undertones in how they interacted with each other. Very physical. the kissing was prolonged perhaps a second longer than I would have been comfortable like witnessing, but I think that was intentional.
Jeffrey only
And the
kisses his
fact-
mom for 3 seconds, everyone. Any longer than that, weird. He cuts it off.
Because
Sorry,
like, you know,
Mrs.
this
Nichols.
is an older movie, and so there is some measure of like disconnect that we are expected to have with these people. But it was hard at points to really visualize her as being the person that gave birth to this man.
I didn't have as big of an issue with it as I would say Ophelia, which I'll get into in a minute. I believe that she was his mom. I will say every relationship I had a hard time because of the nature of the dialogue and the nature of the culture of how they interacted with each other. Mother and son kissing each other on the mouth. Brother and sister, very physical, very touchy. And then they don't introduce each other. They don't act like siblings that I would see. And so was left Googling things. I was like, is that his mom? Is that his stepmom? Like, who is this? Or is Ophelia this dude's brother? Is this his father? So there was that obstacle, but I don't think that was like their fault. I think that was just the nature of Shakespeare and me not knowing much about Shakespeare. But as far as the relationship with Hamlet and his mother, I thought it was pretty believable. I thought he acted like a very concerned child that wanted what was best from his mom and was going to give her his mind about it.
Well, here's what I'll say too. I just want to say that I'm in no way critical of that performance. When I say that there was this disconnect, I think that there was some measure of intention behind it. But I thought that both roles were brilliantly acted. In particular, I think that the actors had good on-screen chemistry. I didn't disbelieve that the characters were son and mother, but it was interesting to note that they looked in appearance more similar in age.
Yeah. Hamlet wasn't mad that his uncle killed his dad and now his uncle is boinking his mom. He was mad that he wasn't boinking his mom. And that's the real story.
It all ties into Phantom Thread, which we watched
Yeah.
not last week, but 2 weeks ago.
The kinkiness of it all. But no, I enjoyed the relationship. I did. But Ophelia, she had such a pivotal role, but at the same time was very not important. I could have done without her, to be honest. Obviously, her death spurs a lot of the final climactic bit, and I thought some of the utilization of her in the story was funny, but I didn't care about her in Hamlet at all. Like, I guess Hamlet was into her. I guess it didn't do anything. I guess maybe it's the idea of adding complexity to him. He's not just a dude out for revenge. He has love, but I didn't care too much for her. Besides, they did use her to further the stake of the tragedy and the insanity, because everyone's like, Hamlet's going insane. He's going insane. But at the end of the day, a little insane, but was more or less correct. But she really did go insane after her father was killed, and had like a Harley Quinn vibes from the Batman. Like, if she did kill herself, she could have become like a serial killer. Did you enjoy what did you feel like she was to the story?
Hamlet has become single-minded in his desire for revenge. Now, this single-mindedness takes a lot of detours, and it's not very efficient, but that is the thing that is forefront on his mind, is I want to make sure that my uncle sees justice, and I want my mom to see justice as well for the betrayal that she committed towards my father. And with that taking center stage, he's kind of willing to give it all up. He's pretending that he's insane, which of course is going to hurt him and how he's perceived by his peers and by the people of Denmark, by the king, and that might hurt him in the line of succession. He's willing to give up this girl that he has loved and courted for a very long time. And not only is he giving her up, he is actively pushing her away. I think it, in some way, serves to show that everything that was important to him has gone to the wayside. And now it's this desire for vengeance.
And I think for me, which is surprising because I didn't have this issue with this movie for most of the time, but I think I wish I didn't get the feeling that Hamlet cared about this girl at all. We had the one scene where he did come in and like grope her almost forcefully and then just left. Uh, and the brother comes into Ophelia and she's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be seeing him anymore. The father's like, maybe you shouldn't be seeing him anymore. But I wish they had a moment where they talked, where they were like, oh, I'm obviously not this poor of written dialogue and exposition, but like, oh, we're in love and love is so great, but I have this thing I must focus on. So I just never believed that they were like an item. And so when we get that, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie where Ophelia's father goes to the king and is like, King, Hamlet is gone crazy with mad love for my daughter because my daughter's so hot, but she said, go away, Hamlet. These loins ain't for you. And the king's like, that makes sense, sure. And so they set a ruse, and they're like hiding behind a wall. The king and the father listening to Hamlet and Ophelia have this conversation, and Hamlet realizes they're listening, and so he's like, oh, I must steal my heart and turn her away. But since I didn't feel like he actually cared for her for the beginning, the subtlety of his acting was lost on me. And that was a little bit of a bummer. And last thing about that scene, one of my favorite shots, the first shot I talked about, that wide shot, I loved it because it's so intentionally composed. This shot I love because of the emotion in their argument of Ophelia being like, no, you love me, don't you? And Hamlet being like, no, I don't. He pushes her like down the stairs. And the scene ends with her. It's amazing. Hamlet leaves, and then the king and the father come out. And Ophelia's crying because Ophelia does love Hamlet, but she also probably felt bad because she was implicit in trying to get him like convicted in the eyes of the king. And so she's crying on the stairs after Hamlet left. And the king and the father are talking. Another shot where they're close up to the camera and she's crying in the background. And the father's like, just a minute, king. Walks over to his daughter and is like, hey, you'll be fine. Shut up, basically. And then walks back to the king and is like, sorry about that. Continue. But the shot I'm talking about is, again, the camera moves a lot. It's like on this jib and she's on the stairs crying and it's pushing down on her. But the way it's shot almost feels like she's at the top of the staircase and we're going up towards her. It almost plays like with your perspective. And I don't love it just because of the composition, but the emotion of her crying and reaching out to the camera and it pushes in on her and then pulls out. Just really love that shot. That one really stuck with me emotionally.
That is a very poignant scene. One thing I'll say, I really like the chemistry between Laertes and Ophelia in the movie. They're the siblings. I just got the sense that they genuinely cared for each other, and the way that she was teasing him as he was being lectured by his father at the beginning of the movie. The father's saying, hey, like, don't lend or borrow, and she's digging through his pockets, and he swats her away. I got the sense that there was real grief on Laertes' part when he learned of his sister's death, and a genuine desire for vengeance against Hamlet for having killed his father and led his sister down this path.
Did you feel that chemistry with Ophelia and Hamlet, though?
That's the thing, is I think I'm with you in that the chemistry wasn't there as much. I would never claim that I am of high enough caliber literarily to criticize Shakespeare, but something I have noticed is maybe he does rely on exposition to explain things that happened out of scene in ways that aren't entirely satisfactory 100% of the time. Don't crucify me, folks. But I know in Romeo and Juliet, at the beginning of the play, Romeo is very distraught because he's been turned down by his ex-girlfriend because she's gone off to be a nun. And we're told that this is eating him up inside. And then he meets Juliet, and all of that disappears in an instant. And so there was no like sense of, oh, I lost something big and now I'm falling in love. But I mean, granted, that is the point. It's young love, but
yeah, even the masters out there, there are some things that maybe could be done better, or again, could be lost in translation where it could have worked. But also, I feel like knowing so little about Shakespeare as I do, but isn't there a whole thing where like there's some level, like he was already pretty out there as far as censorship goes, but I also know I wonder if their romance just was so different than ours, and how they viewed it and showed it is probably very different than us. But I agree with you. I don't know how much it has to do with Laurence Olivier's directing as much as it is like I wish there was just one scene where they had some conversation.
I could absolutely see that. I also, it's interesting. I liked Ophelia and her brother's chemistry a lot. I don't know how I feel about Ophelia's actor. I think she might have been one of the weaker links.
She stuck out to me just physically, neither good nor bad. She just had one of the most striking because she was blonde. She looked very German to me, and no one else in the film looked like her. So she stuck out, which also is probably the point. This is Ophelia. This is the epitome of beauty. And it was so sad when she died. So I'm sure it was an intentional casting. I'm sure it was an intentional casting choice, and I think a good one at that. But she did definitely stick out the most physically. As far as acting goes, I thought she did a good job. Again, I think the weakness comes from not having the motivation of I didn't know if she was in love with Hamlet. Because at the bare minimum, we knew Hamlet liked her because he came in to her room and she like had that voiceover of he came in and he wanted me. But I don't know if we ever got a moment where it's like, but did you want him? Question mark. Like I think the subtext was obvious enough it was, but I do wish there was a little more clarity on her part and she would have made a little more sense. But I will say, fun fact, the painting of Ophelia inspired by this play, one of my favorite paintings of all time. And I also really like the name Ophelia for a kid's name. I like it a lot. I think it's a very pretty name.
It'll be a race. Who can name their daughter Ophelia first?
Yeah, but then
I'm gonna have a bastard very soon. Because I'm not married yet, but I swear I'm gonna win this race.
That's fair. I mean, I pitched the name to my wife, and she says no because the boys will call her Ophi. So it's probably a race you will win.
Ophi, I've never thought of that.
I think it's beautiful, Ophelia. Any Ophelias out there listening to us, send us an email at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com and let us know, has anyone bullied you for having the name Ophelia?
Well, with that being said, we may have come to the end of our podcast. Unless, do you have any extra thoughts?
Yes. One major thing I want to talk about, because you were praising it for this, and I was making sure to pay close attention. The special effects of the ghost and the sound design of the ghost were absolutely stellar. Again, 1948. It's nothing compared to the CGI we can do nowadays, but what they did was so tasteful, so intentional. I love the ghost. He always came shrouded in this mist and this cloud, which they used a lot for transitions. But more than anything, I thought the visuals were good. The sound design they did with this ghost, his voice, his eeriness, the echoey screams in the background, the calmness that they got. Like they decided to go with calm rather than super creepy. It was like deadpan calm, which made it creepy. Uh, and the sound effects of the cries and the screams every time he showed up. So it's almost like this weird juxtaposition. His voice wasn't creepy. It wasn't demonic. It wasn't overbearing. It was very calm and slow. But then everything surrounding him was chaos and void and creepy. And so just the sound design, 10 out of 10. I loved it. And the visual effects for the ghost, this haunting figure, also 10 out of 10.
It was genuinely haunting. It was genuinely creepy and unsettling as a modern day viewer to see this apparition, the rotting face, the lifted visor, the grizzled silvery beard, and the mist. And interestingly enough, both played by Laurence Olivier. Or at least Laurence Olivier was the voice of the ghost. I think it was someone else who was embodying him. But
man can do it all. He could be his own father. So he did want to sleep with his mom. Okay, we figured it out. Podcast over. Hamlet, incest. I'm kidding. But yeah, I just wanted to give a quick nod to that I really enjoyed the sound design of the ghost and just the sound design in the movie overall. Because again, another thing, like older movies, I don't think always had sound design. And a lot of time things were empty outside of dialogue and maybe the score. But this movie intentionally had a lot of sound design going on, and I liked it for that.
No, it's definitely one of my favorite movies of that decade for sure. But with that being said, folks, it's time for us to discuss our holy moments. Nathaniel, what is your holy moment?
As I said earlier, it has to be the scene with Hamlet and his mother, because the veil. I guess I've latched on this term and I liked it. This scene was the closest, the thinnest the veil was for me, and it felt the most human. Where Hamlet was railing into his mom, saying like, "You are a bad person. You have forsaken your father. My you have forsaken your husband, my father. He was a good man. You gave it up for this horrible man. You need to repent for your sins." And when he's kind of shaking her, especially when he gets on the bed, and he has this necklace of his father, and she has a necklace of her now husband, the brother who killed the father. And he's like, "Look at this man. This man is everything that is virtuous, everything that is good, everything that's pure, and look what you hold around your neck, the killer of that." And it was her actual acting that I loved, where she says, I think it's a very famous quote, "Your words are like daggers." And she is saying like, "Please no more, I cannot handle it. You are she's like, "You're forcing me to look inward on a soul that is disgusting and grizzled." And just, I felt the most human and the most realistic when she was forced to face her shame and guilt, because I think she didn't know that the uncle killed her husband, but it's still like, you're still to blame. Like, how quickly you remarried, you didn't question anything, you're fine sleeping with your brother's husband in the span of 2 months. I love the genuine guilt I felt like she had. And it wasn't like this has been boiling over for a while. It was like a snap picture. Something broke inside of her and she immediately realized, "Oh, this is horrible what I've been doing. I haven't been looking inward at all." And for Hamlet to get her to look inward and on herself and see that, it felt the most humanistic to me. And I really enjoyed that whole scene, but specifically that bit.
Our holy moments both have to do with guilt expressed. Mine is Claudius before the altar, and he's praying and he's asking for forgiveness, to be clean of the blood that so thoroughly stains his hands. And Hamlet bears witness to this and goes to kill him, and then ultimately decides not to because he would rather his uncle die a damned man. But it just felt so real, the guilt that he was experiencing. As you said earlier, Claudius was a man who's both selfish and selfless, depending on the context. And you can't just paint him with one broad brush.
Yeah, it's a great scene. It's the scene that comes right before mine. Yeah, I really liked it. I really like, there was a wide shot of the king bowing and praying, and a really beautiful, but also, I don't know, it had a certain emotion on his face I couldn't describe, but the icon of Jesus that he was praying to, I think really set the scene there.
With that, I think I'm going to give this movie a, you know what, I'm going to make it a 4.5.
Very high. I'm going to go with a 3.8. 3.8. Very solid. Really enjoyed it. Would definitely would rewatch it. I would rewatch that movie.
It's so interesting. This is such a rewatchable movie for me, and I can't even explain why or how. There are other movies that I've enjoyed, perhaps even more in the moment, but this is one that I keep on going back to. And it all has to do with how this movie translates this play into audiovisual language that is unique to film. It's so impressive to me as a filmmaker, and I just want to study it.
It would be a lot of fun to go watch Hamlet as a play, and to be able to see the differences there.
I also think that this would be a very interesting movie to watch with the sound off. I know that some cinematographers like doing that exercise for movies to really study their craft more, but I think that this movie does so many very interesting things with camera.
Yeah, I wonder how much, if you knew nothing about Hamlet, how much of the story you would get.
Well, folks, it's time for Nathaniel to spin his wheel.
Oh, folks, guys, I don't even have to spin the wheel because I don't have any movies but one left. But guess what? I'm so excited about this movie that I'm going to spin it regardless, just so we can see it land on the pretty, pretty face that is Sky High. That's right, folks.
All right, drum roll.
Here we go. This is the movie. Honestly, out of all the movies I picked this season, it was the first one that I knew I was going to do. And I'm so excited that I made it to the very end. Praise the Lord. So I'm spinning it. And oh my goodness, what could it be? Oh, it's landing on Mother Frickin' Sky High. That's right, guys. The early 2000s Disney movie that every little boy wanted to have true. I remember I dreamed of an island in the sky that I could go to with my friends, and we would live in a volcano, and I even drew pictures of it. and I just wanted to live there all day long and be a superhero. So
That
super
bus driver is
excited.
the best character.
Oh yeah, yep. So you have seen? I couldn't remember. You've seen it?
I have seen it. It's a great movie.
Okay. It's one of those movies that's like, I don't think it's achieved cult icon level, but I feel like it should be a cult following movie. What a like horrible movie, but like kind of awesome movie.
I would even push back against the horrible. I think it's a good time.
Okay. Hey, horrible and good time can go hand in hand, my friend.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Well, heck yeah. I'm super excited. But also, guys, that means after next week, we only have one more movie, Jeffrey's final movie. So that means a new season of the Holy Moment Podcast is on the horizon. You know what that means. Email us at the Holy Moment Podcast. Give us categories or movie suggestions, or tag us on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Let us know your favorite movies and what we should watch, or just like a really fun genre. We've already had one emailed in, so we'll see if that makes the cut. But yeah, if you want to see anything or anything that tickles your fancy, let us know, and we'll try and watch it for next season.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for next week. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube. Email us at the Holy Moment Podcast at gmail.com. And with that, stay holy.